Năm 2024, năm của những siêu bão với sức tàn phá khủng khiếp. Lũ lụt lịch sử tại nhiều nơi. Nhiều dịch bệnh vẫn hoành hành trên khắp thế giới. Xung đột leo thang kéo kinh tế Gaza tụt hậu về cách đây 70 năm. Trái đất đã chạm ngưỡng chịu đựng khi 7 trong số 9 ranh giới an toàn sống của con người đã bị vượt qua. Nhưng những thách thức đó không thể ngăn cản sự nỗ lực và quyết tâm của các quốc gia và cộng đồng trong việc thực hiện các chính sách phát triển và phục hồi. Trong một thế giới biến động, không chắc chắn, phức tạp và mơ hồ, con người vẫn mạnh mẽ, kiên cường, quyết tâm vượt lên mọi trở ngại, phá vỡ mọi giới hạn để cùng xây dựng một cuộc sống phồn thịnh hơn. Bứt phá kiên cường không chỉ mang thông điệp về sức chịu đựng của loài người, mà còn gửi gắm khát vọng về sự bứt phá ngoạn mục để đưa thế giới phục hồi nhanh chóng và chạm đến những đỉnh cao mới. Bứt phá kiên cường cũng chính là chủ điểm của Giải thưởng Khoa học Công nghệ thường niên toàn cầu VinFuture lần thứ 4. Giá trị lớn nhất và cũng là sứ mệnh của giải thưởng là phát hiện và tôn vinh những công trình nghiên cứu đột phá, góp phần cải thiện chất lượng cuộc sống của hàng tỷ người và tác động tạo sự tiến bộ mạnh mẽ cho nhiều ngành nghề, dịch vụ, giúp mang lại sự thịnh vượng cho tất cả các quốc gia. Hệ thống giải thưởng VinFuture gồm 4 hạng mục. Giải thưởng chính trị giá hơn 76 tỷ đồng, tương đương 3 triệu đô la Mỹ. 3 giải đặc biệt mỗi giải trị giá gần 13 tỷ đồng, tương đương 500.000 đô la Mỹ dành cho nhà khoa học nữ, nhà khoa học đến từ các nước đang phát triển và nhà khoa học nghiên cứu các lĩnh vực mới. Lễ trao giải VinFuture 2024 đã vinh danh những nhà khoa học xuất chúng với các công trình nghiên cứu đột phá, mang đến nguồn sức mạnh to lớn giúp nhân loại kiên cường vượt qua mọi thử thách, đồng thời kiến tạo bệ phóng, đưa thế giới bứt phá và vươn lên một tương lai bền vững hơn, thịnh vượng hơn. VinFuture, khoa học phụng sự nhân loại.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed educators, scientists, guests, and students, welcome to the dialogue with the VinFuture 2024 Prize Laureates. My name is Dan Ruel. I'm the Director of Teaching and Learning Excellence here at Vin University and also a faculty in the College of Arts and Sciences.
And I'm Wendy Nghiên, an affiliate scientist at Vin University. The VinFuture Prize was founded by Vingroup Chairman Mr. Phạm Nhật Vượng and his wife, Madam Phạm Thu Hương, and honors outstanding scientific achievements and transformational innovations which have the potential to impact the lives of millions.
Every year, the VinFuture Prize focuses on highlighting a specific theme, and this year, with the theme Resilient Rebound, VinFuture acknowledges the transformative power of science and technology in enabling humanity to overcome adversity and build a prosperous future.
This morning, we have the privilege of meeting 5 VinFuture Prize laureates to learn how their scientific discoveries have changed lives and hear about their journeys as researchers and innovators. Joining us at today's event, we are honored to welcome the presence of several distinguished government officials, scientists, educators, and delegates.
Representing the VinFuture Prize Council, we gratefully acknowledge the dedication of Professor Sir Richard Henry Friend, Prize Council Chair, as well as the distinguished members of the Council. We're also pleased to welcome the esteemed members from the VinFuture Prize Pre-Screening Committee. Thank you for your dedication.
We are also privileged to welcome distinguished leaders, academics, industry experts, and professionals.
Representing Vingroup, Vin University, and the VinFuture Foundation, we're delighted to welcome Dr. Lê Mai Lan and the other distinguished leaders. Thank you.
To commence the program, it is my honor to invite to the stage Dr. Lê Mai Lan, Vice Chairwoman of Vingroup, Vice President of VinFuture Foundation, and Vice President Vin University, to deliver the opening remarks.
Dear esteemed VinFuture Prize Laureates, educators and scientists, dear cherished guests, students, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to all the scientists. Despite your busy schedules, you have traveled great distances to join us here in Vietnam. On behalf of Vin University, I warmly welcome you to our beautiful campus. This VinFuture Week, Vietnam has felt like it is living a true celebration, a celebration of science and the dreams of research. Yet, looking from the dream to reality, we still face significant challenges. Attracting talent to pursue STEM remains very difficult, especially with the limited participation of female students. And in remote areas outside urban centers, these challenges are even greater. And as our country steps into a new rising era, we are in great need of, and at the same time, great lacking young scientific talent, both female and male. And that is why today, gathering as part of the VinFuture event hold a very special meaning. It is the only occasion where we do not deep dive into technical expertise, but instead explore emotions, aspirations, and kindness, the very qualities that define human uniqueness in the age of machines. We want to hear true insights and personal experience from scientists. Stories so true that they are not only about successes, but also about failures. Stories so true that they are not just about the scientists themselves, but also about their families, their mentors, their friends, their colleagues, their team, the unsung heroes who have made significant contribution to their journeys. And we hope this session will inspire our students to confidently choose the path of science, help them to prepare for challenges ahead, build resilience, nurture patience, and above all, appreciate the true beauty of science. For the ultimate goal of science is to serve life and humanity. Ladies and gentlemen, today I carefully choose to wear the red áo dài because in Vietnam tradition, red symbolizes passion and dedication. So this red áo dài also carries a message of blessing that I wish to extend to all of you. I wish the scientists and the students the best of health, boundless energy, and a warm and inspiring session today that will resonate with all of us. Thank you very much. Enjoy your dialogue.
Thank you for the welcoming words, Dr. Lê Mai La, and for sharing your insights.
Today in each panel, we'll begin with a few questions for the laureates to share their stories, and then open the floor to you, the audience, to directly ask some questions, not too difficult questions, please, to our esteemed laureates. Before we introduce our first panel, let's watch a short video honoring the special prizes for female innovators and innovators with outstanding achievements in emerging fields. Please enjoy.
Tái tạo mô là quá trình sinh học diễn ra tự nhiên, giúp cơ thể phục hồi hoặc thay thế các mô bị tổn thương hoặc bị mất. Khả năng tái tạo hạn chế do nhiều yếu tố như tổn thương phức tạp, lão hóa do tuổi tác hay ảnh hưởng từ các bệnh mãn tính. Thực tế này đặt ra thách thức to lớn cho y học, nhất là khi nguồn cung các bộ phận cấy ghép vẫn còn đặc biệt khan hiếm trên toàn thế giới. Lời giải cho bài toán này đang dần được khám phá nhờ sự ra đời của những vật liệu sinh học mới. Công trình này không chỉ đặt nền móng cho các nghiên cứu nhằm duy trì và tái tạo mô, mà còn được kỳ vọng tạo ra bước ngoặt trong lĩnh vực y học tái tạo. Theo đó, các vật liệu polymer sẽ được ứng dụng trong việc điều trị tổn thương mô, phục hồi chức năng, thậm chí tạo ra các cơ quan thay thế, giúp giảm nhu cầu cấy ghép vĩnh viễn thiết bị cứng, góp phần nâng cao chất lượng sống của hàng triệu người. Giải đặc biệt VinFuture 2024 dành cho nhà khoa học nữ được trao cho giáo sư Christy Ansett, nhà khoa học người Mỹ đã tạo ra những tiến bộ trong thiết kế vật liệu polymer và các phương pháp cho ứng dụng y sinh. Mỗi năm, thế giới có hơn 19 triệu ca mắc mới ung thư và hơn 10 triệu người tử vong vì bệnh này. WHO dự báo đến năm 2050, mỗi năm sẽ có 35 triệu ca mắc ung thư trên toàn cầu, tăng gần gấp đôi so với hiện nay. Ước tính trong giai đoạn từ năm 2020 đến năm 2050, ung thư sẽ gây thiệt hại cho nền kinh tế thế giới hơn 25.000 tỷ đô la Mỹ. Một bước ngoặt trong ngành y học đã diễn ra khi liệu pháp tế bào CAR-T ra đời, mang lại cơ hội sống cho những bệnh nhân ung thư không đáp ứng được với các phương pháp điều trị truyền thống. Liệu pháp CAR-T đã mở ra cuộc cách mạng trong điều trị ung thư với mức độ cá nhân hóa cao. Nghiên cứu này còn thúc đẩy những đổi mới được ứng dụng thành công trong lâm sàng và phát triển ngành sản xuất dược phẩm sinh học trên toàn cầu, góp phần kiến tạo một thế giới khỏe mạnh hơn. Giải đặc biệt VinFuture 2024 dành cho nhà khoa học nghiên cứu các lĩnh vực mới được trao cho 3 nhà khoa học: giáo sư Kajun đến từ Mỹ, giáo sư Jelik Isa đến từ Israel, giáo sư Michel Salai đến từ Mỹ, với công trình tiên phong khám phá và phát triển liệu pháp tế bào CAR-T để điều trị ung thư và các bệnh khác.
Please welcome three awardees to the stage. Firstly, the winner of the 2024 VinFuture Prize for Female Innovators, Dr. Christy Anseth.
And joining Dr. Anseth are two of the three winners of the 2024 VinFuture Prize for Innovators with Outstanding Achievements in Emerging Fields, Dr. Carl June and Dr. Michelle Sadelain. Please welcome.
First of all, big congratulations on receiving the VinFuture Prize. So I just want to note that this is going to be informal, fun, relaxing, nothing serious. So I'd like to start a big question with Professor Anseth. A lot of students nowadays are concerned about their careers, making the right choice. And reading from your story, I know that you made a big transition into the biomedical engineer research. Can you share with us the story behind that and the advice that you can give the student?
Yes, I guess what I would say is that your educational path doesn't have to be linear. I began my studies in the field of chemical engineering because I liked chemistry and math. And chemical engineers solve diverse problems in energy, in new types of water purification systems. And I had a special interest in how that background could be used to improve healthcare in people's lives. So I jumped into learning more about this by training in the biomedical engineering field. And I do think that many of the big problems and innovations will be at the interface of disciplines. So you can collaborate with people with different backgrounds, But I also think it provides a special advantage when you have interdisciplinary knowledge in your head and training in different fields. So you can be the glue between fields.
That's really great sharing. So one more question for you. So when you decided to transition into the biomedical engineering, how and when did you make that decision? And if anyone helped you, like your parents, your friends, or your mentor?
Yes, so I had a wonderful group of mentors, and I would encourage all students to seek out multiple mentors. Sometimes we think of one person as our mentor, but I think you can have many. So I think my mentors early on just encouraged me to take risks early. And so I knew many people that suffered from lack of better medical treatments. And so this was after I got my bachelor's degree that I jumped into and had mentors and surrounded myself with good people that knew a lot about medical applications.
That's really great.
Can I ask, so Dr. Sutherland, was it similar for you? Did you have a change in career along the way, or did you know from the very beginning that this was the right choice for me?
I did not know from the beginning, and I echo what we just heard about landing somewhere not where you thought you would land at the beginning. I went to medical school driven by the curiosity and interest of how the brain works, and I thought I might become a neurologist or a neuroscientist. But then in the course of those studies, I learned about pathologies, I learned about immunology, which I did not know when I started. I felt very attracted to that. Then I realized I should deepen my knowledge, and then I sought to obtain a PhD, a doctoral degree, after obtaining my medical degree. And during my PhD work, I realized that I wanted to engineer cells, but I hadn't done genetic engineering, so then I sought another program at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT, where I started again from the beginning, reinventing myself as a genetic engineer. And finally, I could put it all together to do what I do today.
That's fascinating. And Dr. June, we have a photo. I guess you can probably recognize who it is. So this is a equally handsome version of Dr. June. But if you don't know, Dr. June has a very fascinating career. So you actually started out in the US Navy, and you can probably see the uniform in the photo there. And then you ended up becoming a pioneering researcher in CAR T-cell therapy. Was that a conscious decision, or did one thing lead to another and it was serendipitous?
Well, what I'm learning is, I think my story is similar to Christie's and Michelle Sutherland. You know, I grew up in the time I graduated from high school. My dad was a chemical engineer, and that's what I thought I was going to be. And I applied and got admitted to Stanford. But in 1971, we were in the war, and I got drafted into the Navy. And I actually visited Vietnam as a 19-year-old during the war. And this is the first time I've been back, and I'm really happy to be here since 1972. So I never did go to Stanford. I went into the Navy and then got interested in biology. I never did chemical engineering. I did engineering and biology. And so one message on that is, you know, there's a famous baseball player in the United States who retired named Yogi Berra. And he was a catcher and a philosopher. And he had a saying, which is, if you come to a fork in the road, take it. And that's what we all have done. I mean, you know, you get opportunities and you sometimes have to do a turn in your career. I mean, I never thought I would go into the Navy and into a war. And I never thought then that I would go in. No one in my family had ever been a physician and gotten to medical school. But I got interested in that and was able to follow it long term. And so I think the main thing is following what your interests are. And you do not know when you're in high school necessarily or even in college, what you're really going to do. You need to be prepared to pivot, and take the forks in the road.
Did you ever doubt if you were making the right decision at the time, or did you go with the flow and hope for the best?
You have to take a risk, and sometimes you don't have a choice. And, I think you need, Christy mentioned the word mentors. And there are two kinds of mentors. There are, your professors and, that you go along at different levels. They're your family. But it's your friends and colleagues, like in school. You need to network and learn from them to help make the best decisions.
Thank you. And we'll talk a bit about mentors in just a few minutes. But I'd like to show some photos on the screen. You might have seen these, perhaps. The next slide, please. So you can probably guess one of the people in the photos, but you may not know the other person in the photo. And this is Emily Whitehead. And we'd like to ask Dr. June, could you share with us this story? I'm sure some of you know the background of this patient, but for those who don't, we'd love to hear what's the story of not only Emily, but also the other patients you can see on the right.
Yeah, well, this is the story really of what Michelle and I are here for. We work for about 30 years to learn genetic engineering. And in the center is the first adult patient we ever treated. And he had end-stage leukemia with the cartel's T cells, an engineered immune system that we had made. And he's now 14 years after that. And he still has his CAR T cells, which came from his own body, but now they're genetically modified. And 14 years later, they stay on patrol, but he doesn't have leukemia now. And then 2 years later, we treated Emily Whitehead, who was 7 years old at the time, and she had refractory leukemia, and she also had really a miraculous response, and has grown up now and is a young woman. She's actually a sophomore at the University of Pennsylvania, studying English. So we've seen now more than a decade that these new kinds of immune therapies that are made by genetic engineering can have long-term and life-changing effects.
Thank you. That's wonderful. And Dr. Sadelain, so there's a bit of context. So Emily was the first pediatric patient of this treatment, I believe, but there were these adults that came before. So how did this happen? How did you go from adult patients into a pediatric patient? Because I imagine it was a very risky move to try this treatment on such a young patient.
As Carl just said, this approach is predicated on genetic engineering, but not genetic engineering of plants, genetic engineering of human cells that are reintroduced in the body of patients. If you go back in time to just 25 years ago, this idea was not accepted by many. Some thought it was more like science fiction than science. Others thought it might be very dangerous to genetically modify human cells. And so the beginning was very cautious. Remarkably, in the first trial that we opened, even some of our doctor colleagues were concerned about directing patients to this trial, thinking it was, again, rather frightening. So it was a slow start. But after a few patients, as Carl just said, the responses in these individuals who had what's called refractory disease, meaning that they already had received what's called the standard of care, all treatments that were approved up to that point to treat those diseases, and in which the cancer was still progressing. Remarkably, in those patients, the responses were dramatic, complete regression of the cancer, and as Carl just said, in many of those, these responses have turned out to be very durable. So the first patients were adults, but it was obvious that one had to try this in patients because in children, these leukemias that express this target molecule called CD19 are the most common cancer, and that's what Carl and his team accomplished at the University of Pennsylvania.
I think I want to go back to the mentorship. Professor Anseth, you mentioned about the importance of having the right mentor. And I know that you have several mentors, throughout your career. And looking at this picture, I noticed that Professor Leslie Lee you have that mentor from 1996. It's like over 30 years. And she's actually the only female among your mentors. So I wanted, you to share a story about that.
Sure, I would be happy to. I guess I'll begin by looking on the left of the slide to tell the students that in the United States, I grew up in a very rural area, a state called North Dakota, where there are no metropolitan areas. There's lots of farming, and I didn't know many scientists and engineers. So from that context, I had the opportunity to have many mentors through my educational experience. But when I began as an independent researcher at the University of Colorado, I fortuitously met Professor Leslie Lindwan, who's a biologist. And she was incredibly successful in working in ways to treat cardiovascular disease. But it was the first time that I saw someone that looked like me, that was highly successful, and I could relate and see myself. And she has become a very close friend, but she taught me a lot. So I think you go from mentorships to advocates. And she really advocated for me at the university and taught me leadership skills, introduced me to new people to collaborate and network with. And I'm forever grateful for that. And I do think with the VinFuture Prize, it's very nice that they have a special award for women innovators, because I do hope that that inspires more women to become interested in science and engineering.
Can I ask a follow-up, Wendy, if that's okay? Did you approach her? Did you kind of knock on her door and say, hey, could you be my mentor? Or was it more a longer relationship that built up to mentorship?
Yes, so I think sometimes these interactions occur serendipitously. So it's not always planned. It's those chance encounters. And I happened to serve on a committee and approached her, and it just led to a long-term interaction. So it doesn't have to be a formal searching for who will be your mentor, but be open and to new environments and introduce yourself to new people, because you never know who will make an impact in your career.
So Professor Michelle, is it similar for you when you found your mentor?
Same story. You don't know who will turn out to be your mentor. What's important is to reach out, talk to your fellow students, talk to your professors, be open-minded. When there are opportunities to talk, to network, please do so, and great things will happen.
How about you, Professor Jun?
I had many of the same experiences. I can remember a 7th grade teacher, that my first science class. I can remember my football coach. They all taught me different lessons, lessons that end up helping you along as you make decisions. And some are long-term interactions, as Christy mentioned, and some will be short-term. But I think that's the beauty of this as you go through training, I think, is to be able to develop these relationships.
Thank you very much for your sharings. I think that is really helpful for our students. So now we're going to open the question to the students. Anyone want to try the first question?
Thank you so much for being here today. So my name is Ting, and I'm a junior student in electrical engineering at Vin University. And I have a question to ask Professor Christie. And first of all, I want to congratulate you on receiving a very amazing VinFuture Prize. So my question is about your research work involved the application of material science, like biomaterials, to medical application. And as a young researcher, also work in this field, and I also see that at present, people spend a lot of efforts in leveraging materials in all aspects of life. So how do you see the position of this field, like the material science field, in the today's work? And apart from the AI tech, because now people just talk about AI so a lot, do you think that material science and their applications will also be the hot trend and lead the ongoing industrial revolution in the near future? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. So let me begin by saying when I started my career in this field, most of the materials used in medicine were designed for other applications. There were clothing, there were windows, many different plastics that we use in commercial products. So I think when I jumped into the field, I became very interested. Can we design materials to interface with living systems and the body? And that's the way we think about it. And I think there are many advances in the field with rationally designing materials to interface with cells and regrow tissues. But the problems are complex and the experimental space is broad. So I think we're at the beginning of the interface of using AI and different types of techniques to help us figure out when we're trying to engineer or design a material for a tissue replacement or a tissue engineered construct, can we better inform ourselves by learning from the large data that we have so we can be more efficient in our experiments and really tackle harder problems such as can we design miniature organs that could help people that have diabetes or things like this that are still decades away.
We welcome more questions.
Hello, Professor. Thanks for spending time with us today. I'm Lê Sơn. I'm a sophomore student in computer science at Vin University. So I want to ask a question for Professor Carl and Michael. I'm very impressed about your cell therapy development because I'm really interested in this field too. And as I know in your research, you have to detect the T cells and engineer them. So do you utilize any AI to help anything in your research? And if not, do you think AI can help develop this model in the future? And how important do you think the interdisciplinary knowledge is in conducting the research? Thank you.
Well, thank you for that question, and it's really at the cutting edge. I think what both Michelle Sadelain and I have done is take advantage of nature's AI, which was, we took domains of proteins and then genetically stitched them together in ways that had not happened through evolution. But those modular proteins had been evolutionarily optimized over millions of years of, for optimized signaling. So that's how we got to where we are to have now artificial signaling networks by using repurposing other modules that had been developed. But I think we're now at this area of a totally synthetic engineering, as will be used with AI, as you've implied.
As Carl just said, when this work began, there was no really AI to help. And actually what's characteristic of this approach is that it was, at the time, very unconventional, very creative. I don't know if AI today would propose to come up with a solution of this kind, given that it went against what people thought they knew at the time. There's a famous quote by a physiologist of the 19th century that says, "It is what we think we know that stops us from learning more." And this approach was not obvious at the time. Now today, we do believe that AI will help. At the present, people who are entering these fields are performing large screens. They are unbiased. It's very contrary to this selective approach that we took years ago. And let's see, and let's hope that this approach will make this form of therapy even better than it is today.
Thank you very much. We open for 2 more questions.
Hello. So first I would like to introduce myself. My name is Feng. I'm a sophomore of the College of Arts and Sciences, and I study communications and also psychology. And first I would like to congratulate you guys on receiving such amazing prizes. And thank you all for spending your precious time with us today. So my question is, as a student studying humanities and social sciences, I'm very interested in not only new inventions and technologies, but also how you guys could bring those initiatives closer to individuals, especially those vulnerable stakeholders, such as lower class citizens, children, and women. And during your work, is there any specific actions or methods you use to ensure wide accessibility to your inventions and technologies? And about mentoring, for those who just start their first research projects, is there any best advice that you want to give us as a very beginner student? Thank you so much.
All right, I'll begin. I do think that in healthcare, there is always a push to develop more and more technology, and sometimes this can bring more expense. But I think in parallel, we're very interested in ways that we can develop technology that can reach remote locations and be accessible for people in healthcare everywhere. And so along these lines, we work on scaffolds that can stabilize vaccines or drugs that could be administered in a one shot and stabilize even without refrigeration. As a woman, we think about a woman is not a small man, but many times drugs are dosed based upon weight. So we design different types of in vitro tissue models, and we test what are the best drugs for men and women to treat disease. So that's just one example. And then when beginning in any field or research, I would encourage students to be curious and ask questions, and don't be afraid that that will lead to any judgments. I think that's the only way you learn in a field. So thank you.
That's really fascinating. Let's do one last question. Maybe over here?
Hello? Hello, can anybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'm PhD candidate from the University of British Columbia, Vancouver, Canada. And I came here as a presenter at the OIC conference. And I was surprised to realize that I may be the only one social scientist that present at the conference. And in this very exciting time when we see a lot of advancement in technology, so people are all excited about engineering, technology, coding. Somehow I feel there's a little bit of marginalization of the social science perspective. So I wonder, with your all incredible personal and professional journey, what do you think about social science, the role of social science in your particular field, and especially with the very recent research that gained you this prestigious award? Is there a role of social science in that research in particular? Thank you very much. Please go ahead.
I have, one thought on that, which is different societies have different openness and risk-taking to new therapies. So right here in Asia, in Japan, they were very slow to take up CAR T cells. But you go across the sea, China has more than 500 trials and has been much more adopting of this new genetic engineering approach. In Europe, you can look at it as, when genetic engineering of plants evolved, the Germans were very conservative and would not take genetically engineered tomatoes, for instance, so as in an agricultural area. So different societies have different inherent risk-taking and change abilities. And I learned yesterday, I was delighted to learn that in Vietnam now, you've treated 15 patients here in Hanoi with CAR T cells. And so you're a rapid adopter. Not very many low and middle income countries have been able to do that. So I think that places Vietnam in the category of early adopters. But I think social sciences are needed to look into this and to optimize how we educate the lay public to new therapies.
Would you like to share some stuff?
Yes. Tangential perhaps, but this approach of engineered immunity holds great promise for not just lymphomas, leukemias, but other cancers and possibly many other diseases. Having said that, it's a high-tech approach. You extract from the patient their own cells, you engineer them, carefully, thoughtfully test them, and reinfuse them. And while the process is now very solidly established and with an excellent safety record, it's still expensive. And I think that we scientists, at least for myself, now have to think about not only how to improve the efficacy of this therapy, but how to allow for its broader distribution and for equitable access. And so in that regards, questions of that sort, or at least for the first time for me, influencing the directions of my research.
Thank you so much for your sharing. Let's give our panelists a big applause. Now we're inviting you to go back to your seats and enjoy.
Well, thank you to all of our laureates for your wonderful and inspiring sharing. For me personally, I think I can have two takeaways. Number one is it's never too late to change your trajectory, even if it might be a little bit scary or intimidating. Be open to opportunities and take risks, and you never know where the journey will take you. And secondly, about mentoring, finding a good mentor is obviously very important, but it doesn't need to be one single mentor. All of our laureates talked about multiple mentors, and they don't necessarily need to be formal mentors knocking on a door and saying, "Can you mentor me?" It could be a relationship that turns into some kind of a mentorship. So for me, those were the key takeaways.
Absolutely.
Well, we've been talking about some heavy topics, and as interesting and enlightening as they are, I think we need to relax just a little bit. So we have a very special performance of a traditional Vietnamese song. It relates to horses, And you may recognize it. It's called Li Nge O. I don't have the English translation. I believe it's the horse.
Traditional horse?
Traditional horses. I'm not selling it very well, but believe me, it's a very beautiful and traditional song. So we have a very special guest, the Zosang Choir, and we're going to give them a few minutes just to get set up. And in the meantime, we'd like to acknowledge one of the other three winners of the Innovators of Outstanding Achievements in Emerging Fields. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here today, but Professor Zelig Eshar was the third recipient of that award. And we're very fortunate to have two very special people in his life. We have his daughter, Sharon, and his very long-term collaborator, Tova Wax, from the Weizmann Institute of Science in Israel. So they're here in the front, and we'd love to hear a little bit about Dr. Eshar, maybe a story or something you could share with us.
Thank you for joining us today. Can you share with us a little bit stories about Dr. Eshar?
My name is Tova Wax, and I'm working with Professor Eshar from 1970. In the 80s, we started to work on T cells, and in 84, Professor Eshar was on a sabbatical and sent me a telegram about the idea of CAR T. At that time, we called it T-bodies. It was an in vitro study, and the first CAR was sent the DNA from the NIH to the Weizmann Institute by post in an envelope. I received and I infected to a virus T-cell line, not human T-cell, mouse T-cell line. We didn't have at that time a fluorescent microscope in the lab, and I had to go to the 7th floor to watch the Petri dish with the cells. It was so excited to see the green color of GFP, which was in the construct, that I shouted out, and everyone in the building came to see what happened. Because after 10 years of working unsuccessfully, suddenly I saw the light. And it was so wonderful. So for everyone who is just starting, don't give up. Try more and more, and hopefully you will get there. Thank you.
Thank you for your touching story. Would you like to share some story as well? I saw some tears.
Yeah, it's very emotional. Thank you for inviting me. Yeah, I wish my father could be here. We're very proud of him. And I think for the students, I want to say that just follow your heart, your passions, and do what you like to do. Because if you're doing something, you're enthusiastic about it, and you're curious about it, then you know, you enjoy the time, and you also you're likely to succeed also. And I think, yeah, I mean, for me, remember my dad putting all these long hours and coming home late, but he always was very, very, you know, into it and really loved it. So that's what I remember. And he was really always enthusiastic about nature and that. And yeah, he also came from a very humble family, but I think, yeah, it's very important to study, and the rest is history. And you need some luck too, you know. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your touching stories. It means a lot to our students to hear this from his family. So now let's enjoy
So ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy the performance of the traditional Vietnamese song Ly Ngô Ô, brought to you by the Gió Sang or Green Wind Choir. Please enjoy.
Welcome to the second panel with the theme of Keep Moving and Keep Learning, where we honor the pioneer whose work profoundly impacted the growth of artificial intelligence.
It is our great privilege to introduce 2 of the 5 grand prize winners to our second panel. These distinguished scientists and visionary pioneers in the field of AI have done groundbreaking work which forms the bedrock of today's AI revolution. Let's watch a video to highlight the grand prize winners. Please enjoy.
Công nghệ hỗ trợ lái nâng cao, trợ lý ảo trên hàng tỷ thiết bị và phương tiện thông minh, hệ thống camera AI hiện diện khắp thế giới, AlphaFold dự đoán cấu trúc 3D của hàng trăm triệu protein, hay công nghệ dự báo siêu bão với độ chính xác ngày càng cao. Những lĩnh vực tưởng chừng không có gì liên quan, thực tế đều là ứng dụng của thuật toán học sâu. Thuật toán học sâu sử dụng mạng lưới neuron thần kinh nhân tạo, mô phỏng các tế bào thần kinh trong não người. Thuật toán này huấn luyện để máy tính tự động học và hiểu dữ liệu, giống như cách hoạt động của não bộ. Từ đó có thể giải quyết các vấn đề phức tạp, từ nhận diện hình ảnh, giọng nói đến phân tích dữ liệu quy mô lớn, với tốc độ và độ chính xác đáng kinh ngạc. Dù đã tạo nên những thay đổi sâu sắc trong cách con người sống và làm việc, song thuật toán học sâu và các ứng dụng mới chỉ ở giai đoạn bình minh. Tương lai của học sâu là không có giới hạn, với tốc độ tăng trưởng theo cấp số mũ. Đặc biệt, học sâu kết hợp cùng dữ liệu lớn sẽ là chìa khóa giải quyết những thách thức lớn nhất mà nhân loại phải đối mặt, như biến đổi khí hậu, dịch bệnh hay bùng nổ dân số. Từ đó nâng cao chất lượng cuộc sống của hàng tỷ người và đặt nền móng cho một tương lai tốt đẹp hơn. Giải thưởng chính VinFuture 2024 sẽ được vinh danh 5 nhà khoa học cho những đóng góp đột phá để thúc đẩy sự tiến bộ của học sâu. Giáo sư Joshua Benjo và giáo sư Geoffrey Hinton đến từ Canada với nghiên cứu tiên phong về mạng neuron và các thuật toán học sâu. Ông Chen Sun Huang đến từ Mỹ với kiến trúc thuật toán cho học sâu và điện toán tăng tốc. Giáo sư Ian LeCun đến từ Mỹ với nghiên cứu tiên phong về mạng neuron tích chập cho thị giác máy tính. Giáo sư Kay Peley đến từ Mỹ vì những đóng góp tiên phong cho thị giác máy tính và nhận dạng hình ảnh quy mô lớn.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join us in welcoming to the stage 2 of the 5 2024 VinFuture Grand Prize winners. Professor Joshua Bengio, often called the godfather of deep learning.
Professor Jan LeCun, Silver Professor at New York University and Chief AI Scientist at Meta. Ladies and gentlemen, give a warm round of applause to Professor Joshua Bengio and Professor Jan LeCun. First of all, congratulations to both of you and all the grand prize winner. So we heard that you did a traditional teacup called Mujing. So I guess your right brand, of creativity and for music kicked in. So is it true that scientists like you have a side for artistic? Can you share?
Jan is the musician.
Oh, you're a musician.
Amateur.
I'm also a piano classical musician.
I'm terrible, but I try to play music. I even build electronic music instruments. I've been playing with synthesizers and electronics since I was a teenager. That got me interested in computers, actually.
How so?
And I twisted Joshua's arm so that he would come with me on stage.
I wouldn't go.
He wouldn't go. He didn't want to go, but I forced him.
Oh no!
And I managed to actually make it work, surprisingly.
I see.
So it's easy, actually.
So do you have any special talents that we don't know about?
Walking in nature and thinking about like crazy ideas and math and stuff.
Well, let's talk about crazy ideas. So back in the 1990s, there was an AI Cold War, and I know that everyone kind of shut down about AI. They did not believe in AI. So how did you handle the situation?
I think both Jan and I and Jeff are very opinionated, and we just listen to our own reasoning, but also because we had friends who shared similar visions. It helped support us into continuing in the direction that we saw was promising, but few people believed in.
I think what happened really is that over the course of the last 70 years or so, there's been waves of interest in AI, and then that interest died. But those waves, there were multiple waves simultaneously for different types of methods in AI. So symbolic AI, classic AI, expert systems. There were waves of interest in the 50s. Then it died a little bit in the 70s. Then it reappeared in the early 80s for symbolic AI. And for neural nets and machine learning that we now call deep learning or AI, there were also waves, but they were not at the same time. So there was a wave of interest in the late 50s for learning machines with a perceptron, and then that died in the late 60s. But in fact, the field continued. It's just that the people working on what was not yet called machine learning lost the ambition to build intelligent machines. They just changed the name of what they were working on. So instead of being called neural networks or artificial intelligence, they called it adaptive filters. That sounds much more serious. Or they called it statistical pattern recognition. That sounds even more serious. And those became fields of engineering, but they had lost the ambition to build intelligent machines. The same thing happened in the 90s. So there was a wave of interest in neural nets in the mid-80s that lasted until the mid-90s. And then in the mid-90s, people lost the ambition to build intelligent machines and started calling this just machine learning. It's just useful. It's an engineering set of disciplines. We're not claiming we're building intelligent machines. That lasted from the mid-90s to the mid-2000s or late 2000s. And that's when people like us started to revive the idea that perhaps we could actually get interested again in the idea of building intelligent machines.
And I need to make a connection here that is was part and maybe is part still of our motivation, which was understanding the human brain and intelligence in humans, thinking that there were some shared principles between biological intelligence and how we might build intelligent machines in the future, and not being discouraged by the fact that, like in the 90s, the late 90s, I remember I had, debates with other machine learning researchers who thought that the dream of building machines as smart as humans was just science fiction. That, it would never happen, and we should just solve problems in the here and now. And we do need to solve problems in the here and now, but I think it's quite important to also have a long-term vision and go for the big challenges.
Yeah. So I want to go back to the resilience. I remember back in my days at Stanford, we have IQ, EQ, but then we talked a lot about AQ, means adversity. And I think for young students, it's really important to have that. So can you share a little bit of your experience and advice for them?
One thing I want to mention is, and I think that's connected to your previous question, there's a big difference between the motivation you have because you've thought about something for yourself and you've chosen a path or a direction that you've built in your own mind compared with somebody tells you, oh, you should do this. Oh, here's what I think. The motivation is not going to be the same. If it comes from you and because you have like deeply thought about it, maybe for years, and created a sort of a plan for yourself, you can go through a lot of adversity.
Thank you. How about you?
Yeah, I think if you are aspirations to become a scientist, or if you are a scientist and you really want to bring something to the table, you should not hesitate to put into question the common wisdom. So for example, if you get into AI today, let's say you are graduating from college and you want to do a PhD or graduate studies in AI, the most logical thing to do would be to work on large language models and chatbots, right? And my advice to you, if you're a student, is don't do this. Do not work on large language models. It's boring. Not only is it boring, you're going to be in competition with people in industry who have enormous amounts of resources, and you're not going to be able to contribute significant things to that as an academic and as a student. And so what you should do is ask yourself, what is it that everybody is getting wrong? And try to do something different. What is it that current AI system cannot do? What ideas can you propose that will take us to the next level, and work on that? It will probably be a topic that is not very popular at the moment, but it might become popular 5 years from now when you finish your PhD, and now your career is made. Okay? So if you work on something that's fashionable, you're just going to be following everyone else.
Let me add something on top of that. Scientific research is an exploration, and when we explore, we don't know where we're going to find the answers. And so we need different people, different labs, different groups exploring in different directions. And we should respect that. Like, I feel strongly that this might be more exciting, this particular direction. For example, Jan and I don't see the same path forward about how to address some technical challenges. But that's great, right? We do need more diversity in the ideas that are going to be explored, and we need to respect those differences, in fact, encourage them. So don't feel bad if you're doing something different from the trend, or different from your neighbor or your professor. This is how science is really going to happen.
Thank you very much. That's very inspiring.
Yeah. I'd like to pick up on something that Professor Lacan said, and it was about kind of the vision, or thinking about the future with ambition. So we have some photos of two very different places. These are both photos from the 1980s. And believe it or not, the one on the left, this is not from the 1940s, this is actually in the 1980s. And you can see there's the tram, which no longer exists in Hanoi. And at the same or similar period, we have Paris over on the right. So same time, but obviously very different places. And I use these photos just to set up the idea that things have changed very quickly, right? But back then, in say the 1990s, did you have a vision that, in 30, 40, 50 years, AI or the world will look like this? Or were you more taking it kind of one step at a time? Did you have any idea that the future, that your ideas would turn into this, this AI revolution that we talk about today?
So, yes and no. I mean, clearly, the world was going to change and technology was going to evolve, and the evolution of science and technology is very difficult to predict in the long term. Most people actually underestimate the progress in the long term. They overestimate the progress in the short term. What I didn't know, what I didn't realize in the 1980s when I started working on machine learning and neural net, it was clear to me that ultimately we were going to build machines that were going to be able to perceive, perhaps understand language, perhaps do something like this, and perhaps learn to perceive the way animals and humans do it, perhaps based on neural nets, right? That was pretty obvious to me back then. Whether we were going to be able to build like, self-driving cars or things like this was a bit of a pipe dream at the time, but it was certainly in the realm of possibilities. What I did not envision was that the progress was going to be very choppy, that there was going to be this wave of interest between the mid-80s and mid-90s, and then nobody would work on it for almost 10 years, and then we would have to, basically conspire to reignite the interest of the community in those methods in the mid-2000s. But then after that, the progress was so fast that it surprised all of us. I mean, the rapid takeoff of the interest of the industry and academic world and everything for deep learning around 2013 or so was incredible and unforeseeable. And by the way, I have an apartment in Paris that's right next door to this.
I want to go back to your question and maybe complement a bit what Jan said. At least the way I was thinking about these things was neither of the answers you suggested. So I wasn't thinking about applications. I wasn't thinking about how it's going to change society. I mean, honestly, like the things we were doing, they were so dumb compared to what we see now, for example. It was hard to project ourselves in such a future. And so the focus for me was at a very intellectual level about thinking of the principles that may drive learning in these neural networks. And trying to think of it a little bit like physicists have been thinking of laws of nature, but what are the principles that give rise, like simple principles, like a few equations, that can give rise to efficient learning of the kind we see in humans and animals. And that really was the only focus. And there's a lot of complexity behind these questions.
Yeah, I think Joshua is making an important point here, which is that, even back in the 1980s when I started to get interested in this, if you look at my papers or my work or even Joshua's, you might think I was interested in, character recognition, or I was interested in, some application area, but really I wasn't. The whole idea was to figure out the mystery of intelligence, and as engineers and scientists, the best way to validate a theory of something like that is you build a system that actually implements your ideas, right? A good way to verify that you have a good theory of intelligence is to build a machine that is capable of intelligent behavior. So how do you build intelligent machines? So I never thought I was smart enough to just design an intelligent machine. So an intelligent machine has to design itself through learning. And in fact, in the biological world, intelligence emerges from learning. There is no nervous system in nature that does not learn. Everything learns, right? Or adapts, at least. Okay, so how do you learn? Now, I discovered that people that worked on learning machines in the 50s when I was still an undergrad, and I was fascinated by this idea, so I started digging the literature about how machine learning works, and discovered that the whole field died 10 years before, in the 70s. And so, started to think how can we go beyond that? And despite the fact that at the time when I started my graduate studies, nobody, at least in France, was working on this. There were a few people in Japan that were working in neural nets, but there were nobody in the West, in France or the US, was working on neural nets. Extremely few people. Jeff Hinton was, but I didn't know about him at the time. And so you work your way back, and so can you come up with a method to train neural nets to organize themselves so that they can run complex ideas? And that's where backpropagation and algorithms of this type that we use now came out. And then the next question is, how do you organize those neural nets so that they can recognize images? And at the time in the 1980s, you could not plug a USB camera on a computer. So just getting images into a computer was really difficult, right? So the only images that we had access to were produced by scanners, by the post office, or banks for reading checks, right? So the only the only thing we could do is recognize characters, because that's the only data we had. But that was not an interest in applications. The goal was much longer term. And I think that's kind of a good recommendation. Have an ambitious long-term goal, and then work your way back and take the first step.
Just want to add a bit of the flavor of the thinking I had in the 80s and 90s. So when I was doing my master's, so that was like the beginning of my research, I did experiments with Boltzmann machines, and Jeff Hinton was the external examiner of the thesis, and he said, oh, this should not work because you have like way too, oh, you were?
There were two external examiners. I was one of them.
Okay. So anyways, somebody wrote,
we met when he was a master's student and I was a postdoc in Toronto.
So somebody wrote, this should not work. Like there are many more parameters than examples. And in the kind of classical understanding of statistics at that time, it didn't make sense. And so there are mysteries like this. Now we understand better, but there are actually still mysteries around this very question today. But understanding those mysteries is so important to make progress. And in my career, often it's the mysteries that have driven my kind of deeper insights. And when something doesn't work, like I tried to make recurrent neural nets work in the early 90s, and it didn't work. And like, you could have said, okay, so this whole thing doesn't work. But I was wondering, like, what are the fundamental reasons why it doesn't work? And actually, there are mathematical reasons that we can understand and analyze. And so sometimes what seems to be a failure can actually be a deep understanding that we can get from the experiments.
And vice versa. In the 90s, the theoreticians of machine learning were telling us neural networks and deep learning cannot work. From the theoretical point of view, it breaks everything you read in every textbook, right? Because those are systems that have enormous numbers of parameters, they're over-parameterized, they should not generalize, they just should not work. The optimization, the function you optimize when you train them is non-convex. You don't have any proof that those systems can work. There is no mathematics you can write because it's too complicated. Those things should not work. And you would show them results, they tell them, but they do work. They say, yeah, but the theory says it doesn't work. Okay, so for 10 years, we, both of us had to, go to fight with our theoretically inclined colleagues and tell them, there is empirical evidence that whatever theory you think is correct is actually not correct. And they would dismiss those experiments because the theory that they thought was correct didn't fit. And it was not until the empirical evidence was so overwhelming that finally the results were accepted. And then it took several years for theoreticians to revise the theory and realize that, yeah, maybe we made a mistake, and actually those things, there's a good reason for those things to work. We still don't completely understand why, actually, but that's an interesting phenomenon that you don't want to trust the theory too much because sometimes it limits your thinking. And very often in science and technology, the artifact precedes the theory that explains why it works or why it doesn't work. A good example is the lens and the telescope. The telescope was invented before the whole theory of optics was figured out by Newton. Galileo, built telescopes before Newton figured out how you can build them. The steam engine was invented in the 17th century or 18th century, but the theory, thermodynamics, the theory of the steam engine was not produced until 100 years later in the 19th century. So it's not the case that the theory precedes the practice. It's very often the other way around.
Interesting. So we think it's time for a little bit of a fun challenge for our two laureates, if you're willing. So Professor Lacan, you're currently working at Meta, which I think everyone knows. And Professor Bengio, you've been, I believe, primarily working in academia for your career. So obviously very different contexts. And we'd like to have a little challenge So in 1 minute, can you convince your peer to switch sides? So for example, join industry or go back to academia. So would anyone like to go first to convince your peer?
Okay, I'll go first and challenge the question. Okay, you have to know the history of this. So I started my career in industry. I did a postdoc at University of Toronto, but then I joined Bell Labs in 1988. And there was this young, talented scientist from Montreal whom I met when he was a master's student. And he was finishing his PhD, and I convinced him to come work at Bell Labs. So I convinced Joshua to join industry in 1991.
And how did you do that? What did you say to him?
So, well, I mean, I didn't have to try very hard. He'd already done a postdoc at MIT, and he came to Bell Labs, and he was a research scientist at Bell Labs for a few years. And then he said, I really need to go back to Quebec. My wife wants to live there, and I think I can get a professorship, and blah blah blah. And I really feel I want to live in Quebec, which I understand completely because I was also uprooted from France. And so I told him, okay, take your job, but you're going to keep a job part-time at Bell Labs. So in fact, he stayed employed at AT&T Bell Labs or AT&T Labs until the mid-90s.
I came in the summers.
He came in the summers, spent 3 months in the summers until the late 90s, actually.
Right.
And participated in all the research projects.
And Jan is working for Meta, but he's also part-time working for NYU, and he's supervising students. So we're both, well knowledgeable of both worlds. But let me maybe try to bring up something about academia that I think motivates me a lot, and that is mentoring and playing a kind of leadership role in a research group of young students who start with a lot of potential and not a lot of clarity as to what they want to do. And so they really need some suggestions of what to work on, and they need feedback when they start having their own ideas. And working with, in my case, a large group of students, I have like over 25 students now, has been like having a second family. And the emotional kind of benefit of that role, not to mention the scientific benefit, because it gives tremendous leverage to have all of these people working on ideas with you, I think has been amazing for me. And the last thing I want to mention, of course, to be true to myself, is I feel so much better in the context where I know I'm working for the public. So universities have a non-profit public good mission, and I think it's really important for society that we have a large group of experts who can help, for example, governments in their decision making, who can provide a neutral advice about scientific questions for society, who can research in directions that industry might not. Like, as Jan said, industry is very, very focused right now on one way of doing things. And academia is like the opposite. Academia is everyone wants to do something different, right? This is how academia works. And so this exploratory spirit is very, very strong there.
Yeah, I think the two worlds are very complementary. I love academia. I have one foot in academia and one foot in industry. I became a professor in 2003 at New York University. I'd spent the beginning of my career in industry and switched to academia in 2003. I was 43. I became a professor at age 43. I'd never been an academic before. And for 10 years, I was just an academic. But then Mark Zuckerberg approached me and said, can you create a research lab for us at Meta? And I told him I only have 3 conditions. The first one is I don't move from New York. I'm not going to move to California. The second one is I don't quit my job at NYU, because I think it's really important to have a foot in academia for various reasons. And the third one is we have to practice open research. And this is something I learned, of course, in academia, but also at Bell Labs. At Bell Labs, we were publishing a lot of our work, and this had a big impact on the world. And I thought that was a necessity for a sort of ambitious research lab. And so I've been, for the last 11 years or so, I've managed to basically have one foot in academia, one foot in industry, and I think those two worlds are complementary and both are necessary.
So you're both involved in researching and developing AI, as well as teaching at universities. How do you see AI shape the future of education?
Well, that's a great question. I think there's a huge potential. There are not enough experts, not enough teachers, especially at the higher levels, but actually at all levels in the world, especially in the developing worlds. And if you look at the large language models that Jan doesn't like, well, they have something for them, which is somehow they're able to suck up a huge quantity of knowledge and actually see connections between those pieces of knowledge. So I think as we move forward in these technologies, maybe with new bells and whistles, hopefully, there's a great potential, and a lot of companies already working on developing these tools for tutoring and helping students and be able to connect what they're doing with other fields. So yeah, I think that's something that is still in its infancy, but has a transformative potential for the world that is amazing.
Well, I want to say, it's not that I don't like large language models. I actually like large language models. Some of my best friends are language models. This is a famous Woody Allen joke.
Not to mention other people.
Yes. I mean, they're very useful. It's just that, I don't think they are a sufficient path towards human-level AI. I think we should work on other things that have the right characteristics, and I've been giving talks about this for the last almost 10 years now. So before large language models came to the fore. But for the question of education, what you can think of as large language models and connected technologies is that they basically condensate and distill human knowledge. And there is a possibility that in the near future, we're going to be able to train very large language models that essentially will constitute a kind of repository of all human knowledge, or kind of distilled, interactive repository of all human knowledge. So an entity to which you can ask any question about anything, and it will, give you a reasonable answer. It's much better than an encyclopedia. It's much better than a search engine because it gets the information in sort of a more digestible form, if you want.
And it's interactive, so you can keep digging when you're not sure, what the answer means.
Right. So the impact of that for education and dissemination and access to knowledge in the world, I think, is enormous, right? It's going to give access to knowledge to a lot of people. And eventually, those things will be with us at all times, right? They will live in our smart glasses, and we'll be able to ask them questions at all times. And this is coming in just a few years. In fact, it's available today, to some extent. But eventually, those systems are going to become maybe smarter than us, but that's okay.
I'm not so sure about that.
It's completely okay, because I'm sure you're familiar with this. I'm certainly familiar with the idea of working with people who are smarter than me. It's the wonderful thing. It's the best thing that can happen to you. It's working with people who are smarter than you. So we're going to have machines that are smarter than us. They're going to be working for us. It's going to be great. Now, what that means, though, in the short term for education is that we need to change the way we evaluate whether students have learned something. Okay, we can test students by just asking them questions for which they can read the answer in a search engine or a textbook. And that doesn't work anymore. We have to be able to basically teach students to really understand things deeply, so they can solve new problems by themselves, as opposed to just regurgitate ready-made answers, which an LLM can do already. Okay, so it's like in the old days, you know, we would have to spend a lot of time teaching little kids how to do arithmetics, right? And now it's less useful because we have calculators. So it's the same thing, but now, you know, it becomes the same, like, you know, is it really worth spending a huge amount of time learning how to compute integrals? Machines can do this now. So the type of mental, intellectual activities that we have to concentrate ourselves on, and we have to learn, are going to be different than the one that we traditionally have been learning.
So I have one more question. With the rapid, you know, growing of AI and startup founders can raise a lot of money, should we be really worried about brain drain, where, you know, top scientists from university will move into industry?
Well, there are pluses and minuses. Actually, right now, I see a lot of people from industry going back to academia. So there's been a moment where industry needed to have a lot more academics who knew about AI, machine learning, deep learning to grow. But I see some of those people who spent years in industry now starting careers in academia, and they play different roles, as we discussed earlier, so they are complementary.
Yeah, I think you see motions both ways, and it depends on the wave of interest. So it's true that, you know, in 2013, 15, 16, there was not enough talents, people who knew about deep learning for the demands of industry. So there was a lot of recruiting from academia to go into industry. A lot of people went there part-time. Some of them for a limited amount of time and came back. Some of them did startups. Many of them keep their academic position at least part-time and then come back full-time after a while. So I think there needs to be sort of a porous boundary between those two things, those two worlds, and it's a very good thing because you get exchange of expertise, information. You know, we need to educate the next generation to invent the next generation of AI system.
Not to mention money. So industry, like I'm leading a very large academic lab, and we've been working with industry who has helped fund a lot of the research done in academia. And of course, that's beneficial for industry because that means more students are trained that become their, you know, staff later.
Okay, so we find at school, don't quit college, okay?
Don't quit college. In
Do
fact,
not quit.
Go to graduate school.
Thank you. So you may know, or you may not know, there are 3 other grand prize winners, and we have a very special clip from Professor Geoffrey Hinton, who took the time to record his feelings about winning the prize. So we'd like to show Professor Hinton sharing his thoughts. Please enjoy.
I'm Geoffrey Hinton. I'm an emeritus professor at the University of Toronto. I spent the last 50 years trying to make neural networks learn, and now they do. It's a very big prize, and I was very surprised that a developing country could give such a big prize. At that point, I hadn't really realized how successful the Vin Group was, or how rapidly the economy of Vietnam was developing. The development of AI, the recent explosion in AI, has been caused by 3 things. There's the research that went into developing better ways of allowing neural networks to learn. And that's the kind of thing Joshua and Jan and me and many other people were doing. But then there's the very fast compute that you get from GPU boards and the massive data that you can get. And a very nice aspect of this award is that it recognized Jensen Huang for pioneering GPU boards that are good for AI. So that combination of the GPU boards from Jensen Huang And the data set from Fei-Fei Li was sort of crucial to the modern development of AI, and it's nice to see them recognized, as well as the people who worked on the neural net algorithms. So I remember in our lab discovering that when you use GPUs for training neural nets, they went 30 times as fast. And that was huge. That was like this speed up that you got in computation over a period of 10 years. All of a sudden, we were sort of 10 years in the future in terms of how fast you could compute. And that made a huge difference to the development of AI. That was very exciting. So it seemed to me that we needed to figure out how you could learn the connection strengths in a neural network. And that would give us a kind of intelligence that was much more like human intelligence and would do things like explain intuition. The logical approach could never explain what intuition was. These big neural nets are intuitive in the same sense as we are. I thought that as we made AI more and more like the brain, it would get smarter and smarter, and eventually we'd end up with something as intelligent as people, but it might take another 30 or 50 years. By 2023, I was worried that it might only take like 5 to 20 years, and it might be much smarter than people. So yeah, that's when I got scared of AI. So it's not an option to stop the development, and so the only option is to try and figure out how we can keep it safe when it's more intelligent than us. In healthcare, for example, it's going to be good for designing new drugs. It's going to be good for making better diagnoses. It's going to be very good for intelligent tutoring. Data suggests that if you give a child a tutor, they learn stuff about twice as fast as they do in the classroom. Already when I want to know something, I ask GPT-4, and it normally gives me a very good explanation. I'm worried. I don't think doom's inevitable, but I don't think we should ignore the possibility, and I think we should be working very hard now to avert it. Hopefully a lot of the smartest students will go into AI safety, will go into figuring out ways to make it safe and to deal with all of the various threats, both the long-term threat that I just talked about, the existential threat of it taking over, and short-term threats like it facilitating cybercrime. The advice I give to young people is, first, work on AI safety, but that's not the only thing you should work on. So my experience has been that the way you do the best research is by pursuing something you're really very interested in. So curiosity is what drives really good research. In particular, you should look for something where everybody else seems to have one approach and you think there's something wrong with it. You just have a gut feeling that there's something wrong with the way they're doing things, and you need to explore that. Often it turns out your gut feeling was wrong, but sometimes your gut feeling is sensible. People are doing things wrong, and if you explore it long enough, you figure out what it is they're doing wrong, and you figure out how to do it right. That's where a lot of the very best research comes from. So if you can do that, you might do some very good research.
For me, there's one quote that really stuck out from his video, and he said, "How can we keep AI safe when it's more intelligent than us?" So this is a very deep question. Do you have the same concerns as Professor Hinton about the safety and the ethics of AI?
No.
Yes. And it's an important debate. There are, the differences between Jan and I here are reflective of greater spectrum of views in the AI and machine learning community. And we need to respect those differences. These differences come usually from two places. One is, when do we think that we'll get human-level systems? If you think it's going to be short, then you want to be more careful, usually. If you think it's going to be in centuries, then you don't worry too much about it. Another aspect, of course, is, in the case of Jan, as I understand, I'll let him speak, is it going to be hard or easy to answer the question that Jeff asked? How do we control systems that are smarter than us? Right now, we don't know the answer. And different people have different ideas on how to solve that, but really, it remains an open challenge.
I mean, I think those are obviously important questions, and we've been conditioned into thinking about them by, science fiction and all kinds of, philosophical debates. So there is a first question where I disagree with Jeff, and we've had this discussion before with him, and it's the question of whether necessarily when an entity is intelligent, it becomes dangerous, or it has a desire to dominate, perhaps. And I think the answer to this is absolutely not. So you can buy a very cheap toy that will beat you at chess, unless you are a grandmaster. But I'm not, so a 30 euro or $30 gadget can beat me at chess. It's not because that system is smarter than me at chess that it is dangerous. What could make an AI system dangerous is if it has a motivation to do something that could have bad side effects for society. And so it all depends on what motivation that we hardwire into those AI systems. And right now, AI systems do not have hardwired motivations. They're trained to do certain things, but they don't have hardwired motivations. The kind of AI architecture I work on personally, and with my colleagues at FAIR, are systems that do have hardwired motivations. And they also have hardwired guardrails. And so those systems will be controllable. Now, whether we can design those guardrails and motivations in such a way that they are only beneficial to society, there's not going to be a theorem that we're going to be able to write that is going to guarantee the safety of AI systems. We're going to have to just design them in such a way that, and iteratively, and refine them in such a way that they do the right thing for everyone. And it's going to be a very, sort of engineering problem, the same way that we've been able to, over the last 50 years, to design safe turbojets. You can fly halfway around the world in complete safety on an airplane with 2 engines. And it's an incredible feat of engineering. And they're completely safe. We're capable of doing this. We can do this with AI systems as well. So the idea that the desire to dominate is associated with intelligence is just false.
So I need to contradict that.
It's also false within the human species. It's not the smartest among us necessarily who want to be the chief. So that's the first point. And then the second point is, which is something I think Joshua is more worried about, is how can we guarantee that AI systems are not going to be used to do bad things by bad people, right? But that's just the history of the world. Like, there is nothing special about AI there. It's just, technology has always been used over the course of human history for good things and bad things.
All right, there's so many things that I disagree with here. I'm going to start with the fundamental thing you said. Like, I agree that there's no, it's not guaranteed that things will turn out badly, but that's the wrong angle. The question is there even a small chance that things will turn out badly? Because badly could mean the end of humanity, which means we have to be cautious. There's a thing called the precautionary principle. Okay, so let me go to the important point you raised. In order to have machines that would be dangerous to us, they would need to have the capabilities of doing dangerous things, so like basically be smarter than us, and they would need the motivation. And you're right. But let's see how motivations could come about, right? The motivations that would be dangerous to us. So to understand that, you need to understand there's some special kinds of goals, like self-preservation. We all have self-preservation goals. Otherwise, evolution would have gotten rid of our genes. And men or women could put this kind of goal in machines. In fact, there are people who want to build machines that are going to be like us. And if they're going to be like us, they're going to have some self-preservation goals. Now, if a machine has a self-preservation goal that's sufficiently important, it would resist being turned off. And then, to make sure we never turn it off, it might need to take action against us, potentially endangering, many people or, the whole human species. How could that happen? As I said, like, people could do it. There are people who think that we should be replaced by machines. There are also technical reasons, contrary to what Jan is saying. So, for example, if we train these systems to maximize the reward they get, then mathematically, the optimal strategy for them is to take, if they have the ability, is to take control of the computer on which they are running so that they can give themselves the maximum reward. And once they have that plan, they need to also, part of the plan is how do I maintain that control forever? So we could create monsters that want to continue existing and maybe make sure they can resist our attempts to turn them off by copying themselves over the internet. We have to make sure this doesn't happen. We need to understand the scenarios where these things can happen. We need to make sure we can, I'm glad that Jan is working on this as well, that we can design methods that will allow us to avoid these scenarios, to control these systems. And right now we don't know how to do it, but we're still racing forward towards building machines in a number of years or decades that will have these potentially dangerous capabilities if we don't control their motivations properly.
Thank you. So a very complex debate, and I hope everyone will continue thinking and having these discussions with your peers. In the interest of time, we do want to show a very special clip, and this was recorded late last night. So we apologize, we didn't have time for the Vietnamese subtitles. So I hope our lovely translators can support with that. But this is a special clip from Jedson Huang, and he recorded it particularly for the students in the audience today. Please apologize the lack of subtitles, but I hope you enjoy this short clip.
Well, STEM is at the center of NVIDIA. It's at the beginning, it's in the middle, it's at the end of NVIDIA. It's everything NVIDIA. And we're fundamentally a computing company. Computer science is very important to us, software is very important to us. And the computing platforms that we create are in service of scientists and creators to solve the problems that are incredibly hard for normal computers to solve. And so we've always dedicated ourselves to this area. Now, as we were just talking about, Vietnam has such a large population of excellent STEM students and software programmers. So I think we have a great opportunity here to make this a great base and a great hub for us. Southeast Asia is also vibrant and growing. This is your decade, and we want to be part of it, and we can contribute greatly to it. We've already spent a fair amount of energy here in Southeast Asia in building the computing platform, contributing to AI research and computer science research, and helping AI startups here in Vietnam. And so we're at the beginning of it, and we want to be part of that journey. And so I think this is going to be a great hub for us. Here's something about life. What you're working on right now is the single most important thing in the world. You don't have to worry about next thing. Just worry about right now and the thing in front of you. Just like when you're in school, you're taking a test or you're studying, that is the most important thing in the world to you right there. And by doing that, you have the ability to concentrate. Concentration and focus is vital to success. And the way to concentrate and focus is make now the most important time. Don't worry about later.
Great. Wonderful advice about concentration and in the moment. We'd like to pass it over to the audience. Does anyone have any questions for our laureates today? I think we probably have time for only maybe 2 questions. We have a lot of hands. I'm impartial, so I'll let, there we are.
Hello. Good morning, esteemed laureate, all the distinguished guests, and all the audience in the auditorium today. My name is Tuần. I'm a senior from the College of Business and Management from the VinFuture University. Firstly, I want to say congratulations to you to receive a very prestigious VinFuture Prize for your contribution to the technology aspect. And I just have a question that I'm a business student and I do not have many deep technical skills, but I really understand the importance of learning AI and keeping myself updated with the current development of AI. So could you suggest some suitable and effective approach for us, especially as a business student, to learn AI and apply into our work? Thank you.
Well, I think there's going to be a big demand for how you deploy and apply AI in society for various applications in the services, in manufacturing, in technology, in agriculture, kind of serving people everywhere. And there are some technical aspects to this, but there is probably a bigger issue, which is to make that technology usable for everyone and democratize it. So that's more on the business side of things, or on the kind of sociological side of things, perhaps on the educational side of things as well, rather than the technology and science.
I agreed. I think right now it may be even harder in our countries to find people with the right business skills to manage like technology startups, AI startups, than to find the engineers. So.
Thank you. Anyone else like to ask a question? Maybe on the other side here, yeah.
Okay, good morning to distinguished guests and the attendant in the auditorium. My name is Khoa. I'm an engineer student studying mechanical engineering at VinUni. So I have a question. Currently, we are having humanoid robot. There is robot that really similar to human. It can interact with human, and I wonder that if maybe in the future that robot can have like the emotion like the human. So my question is that should we let a machine have the emotion like the human? How will we treat that if that happens? And the most important thing, should we let that happen? Thank you.
Yeah, so good question. Okay, so first of all, I think you've made a good choice in topic, in the sense that I think the coming decade is going to be the decade of robotics. This might be, within the next 5-10 years, the AI progress in AI technology is going to be such that perhaps it's going to become possible to have robots that can do everyday tasks. It's not the case today, okay? There are companies that build humanoid robots today. They have no idea how to get them smart enough to be able to do simple tasks for domestic tasks, for example. But it's probably going to occur over the next 5 to 10 years. So maybe it's the right time to do this. Now, to your second question, whether robots or AI systems will have emotions, in my opinion, it's inevitable that they will have emotions, and in fact, it's desirable, because that's the way you motivate them to do the right thing. I was talking earlier when we were having this debate that we need to design motivations in AI systems so that they accomplish the task we want them to accomplish, but some of their motivations are also guardrails that prevent them from doing things that would be dangerous or deleterious to humanities. Now, if you have motivations of this type, if you have drives, inevitably you have emotions, because emotions are basically drives that are unsatisfied or satisfied. If you have a smart enough system that has the capability of anticipating what the effect of its actions is going to be, it's also going to have emotions. Fear is an anticipation of a bad outcome. Elation is an anticipation of a good outcome. If you can anticipate what's going to happen and you have a motivation, you're going to have emotion. So intelligent robots will have emotions. It's inevitable and it is desirable.
All right, so I'm going to agree and disagree. I agree about what emotions are, and that we do need guardrails, and we can think of them as emotions. So where I would put a grain of salt is, I think there's too much unknown and risks in building machines at our image. Earlier I talked about self-preservation, which is a sort of natural goal that living things have. I think that we would be safer if we build machines that are tools for us, that help us solve problems in society, rather than building machines that will be like us, that will be like a new species on this planet. Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, but I think it's such a tremendously important decision, which potentially catastrophic or beneficial consequences, that we should not do it until we understand better what we're doing.
What an honor it has been to hear from the two of the biggest minds who shaped the AI. Universities still play an important role, and you should never give up on your dream of pursuing higher education. A scientist working in R&D for a corporation needs to adapt to the fast-paced environment and the pressure to deliver results. However, whether you work in an academy or in the corporate world, never forget that scientific ethics are fundamental.
Thank you. And could you please give a big round of applause for our two laureates? Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a very thought-provoking morning. Thank you for staying till the end. And as we approach the conclusion of today's event, we invite you to enjoy the wonderful melodies of When You Believe, again performed by the Zaosang Choir. And as the choir prepares for this performance, we'd like to invite one or two audience members just to share your feelings or your thoughts from today's event. Would anyone like to share? No questions for the MCs, please. Just what are your thoughts? What are your feelings after today's event? Would anyone like to share? I think I see a hand here. Down here.
Hi everyone. So first of all, congratulations on the esteemed scientists receive VinFuture Prize. So I'm a student at Vietnam National University. So thanks to the VinUni to give all VinU students here opportunities to join in the dialogue, to listen some the updated technologies and the research. So after the dialogue, I think that is like a big motivation to pursue my dream for the long-term study and also the developing some technology to contribute to the Vietnamese society. So thanks to all professors give us the motivations now.
Thank you, that's very motivating, thank you. One other person like to share? Yeah, I think here in the front, down here, yeah.
So, first of all, thank you for all the laureates of the VinFuture Prize for your contribution and also great panel. And my name is Kiet. So now my feeling is that I really have like hope or a projection for what the future of humanity would be like. There are so many development. Just as you said in the panel, like from the past to the future, we cannot believe that now we are in our position right now. Just like it's so different from like even 10 years earlier. Like 10 years earlier, we just cannot imagine that the computing ability would be like right now. So now I'm being here just like really have hope, but also kind of like a little bit fear and also like responsibility that I have to do something at least for myself and for the future. So that is my feeling right now. And again, thank you VinUni for giving me the opportunity to be here, and thank you the laureate again.
Thank you, that's very profound, thank you. All right, well, without further ado, I'd like to invite the Zaosang Choir back on the stage to perform When You Believe. If you know the words, you can sing along, please. Thank you.
prayers were prayed with no proof anyone could hear. In our hearts a hopeful song we barely understood.
Now we are not afraid, although we know there's much to fear. We were moving mountains long before we knew we could.
Thank you very much to the Zaoshan Choir. We'd like to invite our esteemed laureates and the VinFuture Prize Council and the pre-screening committee members to come on stage to receive flowers from our Vin University students. Please welcome. In the meantime, Wendy, I've been doing my homework, I've been taking my notes, and there are 6 keywords that really stick out for me.
Oh, good for you.
No peeking, can you guess what they are?
Can you share?
All right. So for me, some themes that came out were mentorship, that's a good word, flexibility,
aspiration,
yeah, ethics, uniqueness, and focus, as well as a bit of fun. All right, congratulations again to our laureates. Thank you so much for the VinFuture Prize Committee for all the efforts, and especially thank you to the audience for devoting your morning today. We really hope you enjoyed it. And stick around, because at 1:30 p.m. we'll have even more in-depth presentations from some of our laureates, and we really hope you'll take the time to stick around for the afternoon. In the meantime, have a wonderful lunch and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.